All right, for our faith and culture section, um, we want to talk about some heavy stuff because, yeah, it relates to what's going on in society today. The big topic, a lot of people are talking about it, and as believers, we are concerned. And yeah, this is a space where we can talk about it. So, guys, what are your thoughts on everything that's going on in the Middle East with Gaza, Palestine, Israel, and the unrest over there? And yeah, I know you've been berated with a bunch of news articles or videos or thoughts on social media. So, yeah, Andrew, what do you think about the unrest over there and everything going on?
Yeah, man, well, this is going to be, at least from my point of view, three three total amateurs talking about a very complex and
Whatever. I know
complicated
so
topic.
much.
Yeah.
That
Well,
disclaimer is perfect.
then
Thank you,
Keith
bro.
started with the
Thank
wrong
you.
person. I guess I think about it on a couple of levels. I think about it on just I guess, a political, social level. Obviously, there's unrest, there's conflict. People are suffering, and and so there's that humanitarian level that I think would be true no matter where this conflict is happening. And obviously, it's an ongoing conflict that's been happening really for centuries, but certainly over the past 100 years, since Israel became a nation state in the 1940s. And really even before then, when the Jewish people really began to migrate back to Israel, Palestine, in the early 1900s. So there's a tremendous amount of history that's there. Um, and Again, that's why for us over in San Diego and Texas, we just don't have that perspective. But I know Keith and I have been able to go over there. Abby, I don't know if you've been over to Israel,
I
but
haven't. It's on my
it
bucket
is,
list, but I'm gonna hold off.
yeah, it is something that I think is a real privilege to be able to do, because otherwise all you're seeing are clips. And I would say that too, that almost everything you're seeing, it's not just coming from an unbiased point of view. It's coming from typically either a pro-Israel or a pro-Palestinian point of view, and you're going to have to filter that out, or just be aware that someone's giving you details, but it's not all the details, and the details are being presented in a certain way. So, I mean, the first level I think is the humanitarian side, and then the second one kind of gets into, well, what are the implications for this? Since Israel, the Jewish people, that part of the world is such a huge part of the scriptures and even prophecies that we have, that as believers, most believers are still looking forward to being fulfilled. Um, and so, we can kind of talk about it on those two levels. Um, but I actually try to keep it mostly on the humanitarian side, because
Mm.
um, I think that I personally do believe that God has a purpose and a plan for the Jewish people, and for that part of the world specifically. There's so many prophecies that um, are in the scriptures, and I just finished reading Ezekiel in my Bible reading plan, and I'm reading the last 8, 9 chapters of Ezekiel, where he's talking about this new temple and his people, and how the Levites are going to be doing sacrifices. And I just have to say, I don't know. Like, is that actually still going to happen? Is it actually going to be that literal that there will be another temple? Because the stuff I was reading in Ezekiel, it has not happened yet. So even though a temple was built after Ezekiel, the second temple that Jesus would have visited, that was after Ezekiel. Um, but it's still, what Ezekiel was describing was not happening. God's people were still under the rule of Rome at that time. So I think Paul in Romans 9 through 11, as I read those chapters, it does seem to me that there is a future purpose and plan that God has for the Jewish people, and for the physical descendants of Abraham. How these recent events play into that, I have no idea. I really don't. I do think that we can become too quick to assume that the end times are here, because these rocket attacks are happening, or something is happening. I really don't think it's going to go down that way. I think, like Jesus said, no one knows. So I would say that there's unrest between these two people groups right now, the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I'm sure it has some connection to God's plan, but I don't have a verse in the Bible that I could say like, oh, that's the rocket attacks are talked about in Revelation, chapter 13, and this is a sign that it's all coming to an end, guys. I would have thought, honestly, like if I lived in the 40s, like
Yeah.
Hitler was the Antichrist. Like this was so obvious that Jesus is
Yeah.
coming back any day now, and obviously that hasn't happened. So I just think we need to be humble and trust God and not get too caught up in this latest flare up of conflict over there.
Yeah, but sometimes you got to know your friends, man, Andrew. I think that was a good response. Just got to know your friends. Sometimes I don't know if I could have tackled that the way you approached it that first time. But
Well, I think too, you got to know your friends. I mean, I think all of us have people that are very passionate about this, like in the Christian community, that
yeah,
very pro-Israel. I don't know if you'd say anti-Palestinians, but and so sometimes they can want you to be just as passionate or just as
good point.
focused on, I guess, the geopolitical events as they are. But Abby, have you experienced that in your interactions with people there in your church or your community? The
Not
topic?
specifically in our church. We really try to steer clear of all political things, and I feel like this falls into that category to a lot of extent. But I agree that I think we should focus on just the real tragedy that's going down. However you look at this, there's a lot of people being deeply impacted just in this whole thing because war is not awesome. So, that being said, I will say I kind of do look at this spiritually for sure, because we do know that God is at work in all nations. He puts people on the throne and he takes them off. We know that God is at work to draw people to himself. And so I really think that's my big prayer. And what I try to bring up when this comes up in conversation is just, wow, clearly big things are happening. And we just need to be praying for hearts to turn to Jesus because of this. And I'm glad you brought up the 40s, Andrew, because I think we saw a lot of Jews come to Christ through their Christian neighbors during that time. We also lost a lot of Jews, which was, tragic and horrible no matter what. Genocide is a terrible thing. So I think anytime we see movement of this nature, even in our own country, we want to be praying and asking God to use it for his great purposes. That's what our mind should turn to, is how is this going to bring people to Jesus on both sides. My weird and only Abigail's idea, I'm not going to write a book on this, is that God is going to use the Muslims to make the Jews jealous, because I think having Muslims come to Christ and worship Christ and recognize him as a savior would make Jews furious, like beyond belief. But it should also, there's, verses about the Jews being jealous and that's their way. And I think who better to be jealous of than your literal cousins? So I also pray for that side of this conflict. So I think we don't know how it will turn out, but I do think that we're safe when we pray, when we ask God to use this for his purposes, to draw men and women to him. And this conflict has been going on literally for generations. And I think the only place that we can really do better is not just taking a side,
right,
of like the Jews are right or the Palestinians are right, but just blanketly because we're Christians. But instead to really see how we can humanitarily help. Are there, ways that we can help these people who are just locked in conflict, and, children starving and so forth? So what can we do on that front? Because I think that's really the only way we as just little people can help in any way, but also just really praying, because whether it's the end times or not, these are real humans in the middle of a horrible conflict, and how this is when people start getting on their knees. So I'm just
Mm,
begging Jesus to bring people to him.
yeah, I think that's a cool way to respond, Abby. Like that's definitely the proper response because yeah, God's not limited like we are. We can only do so much. Our range only extends so far, but His doesn't. You know, so falling on our knees is yeah, it's a very appropriate response. And I think for me, I'm learning that it's okay to not know how to feel or not know,
Yeah.
like you said, where to stand on some of these things because you do see people being quick to respond, you know, and I think that was James' warning in his book was saying be quick, you know, quick to listen, quick to hear, quick to understand. So I think a lot of believers are more so quick to respond to where,
Yeah.
yeah, you can see something very tragic or something, and instead of being sympathetic or empathetic, it's a very hard line that's drawn in the sand. So yeah, I think when I do see things going down in the Middle East, it does make my ears perk up just about, hey, but how does this relate to the end times? Like, and I don't
Right.
want to be insensitive because, yeah, people did lose their lives. But if we're keeping it all the way like 100, like all of us are going to go that way at some past, you know. So being able to just to think about the big picture and like think like how does this apply to Jesus's time and him coming back? Yeah, just almost motivates me to stay focused on him and to help people focus on
Um,
him. So, yeah, not saying that we have the answers or that we know exactly how to
No.
respond to this, but that doesn't mean that we can't talk about it and have a civil conversation where we're not saying, okay, these people figure it out.
yeah, so many themes that I think we come back to over and over on this in our
This segment.
conversations. I mean, one of them is, you know, being able to keep a kingdom focus in a world that I think has become so political. Um, yeah, everything's politics, and
Yeah,
then I think another one is social media and how we handle those kind of conversations. So I've definitely seen believers on really, I would say, you know, if there's sides, both sides of this latest conflict. You know, I have friends who are very, I would say, pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, and then I have friends who are super pro-Israel, and they're always going to side with that side no matter what happens. And the conversation is kind of happening on that level, and it's not necessarily even happening on maybe the higher kingdom level or what is God doing.
yeah,
And I think we just have to be, I think we have to be humble at a certain level. Like I'm reading Daniel now, so I'm reading about how God is using Nebuchadnezzar, this really violent, wicked king. I mean, this guy was killing people just at the drop of a hat, you know, if they didn't do what he wanted them to do. And yet God had a purpose and a plan for Nebuchadnezzar and revealed himself multiple times to this evil pagan ruler. And so, like Abby, like you said, God is working. I think that's something that we can have confidence in. He's working even through some of the the evil and the human fallenness that we see. It doesn't mean that God isn't at work. He actually is at work. So it's something that should drive us to pray and but to also just admit that I'm not sure exactly what's happening, but I'm
yeah.
confident God is working.
Yeah. Well, as usual, this was I think a really good one. I'm super thankful for you guys, Zach. We miss you a lot. Love you, brother. Be safe on the road, and yeah, if you like what we're doing here, you want to see it grow. I think on our YouTube page we're at like 353 subscribers or something like that. And we really want to get to 500. And you can help with that by clicking the like button or writing a comment or giving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Those are all things that you can do to get this message out. So we thank you guys, and we will see you in the next couple weeks.
Bye.
Hi, guys.